We also spent some time in class yesterday talking about neuropsychological testing, and we talked about how, with neuropsychological testing, what we're doing is asking people to perform different types of tasks that might give us a clue or might suggest that there's some sort of brain damage. And we talked about how, with neuropsychological testing, some examples of those tests include things like the Lurie, Nebraska, and the Hallstatt-Ratten batteries. But another test that we talked about in class a little bit, and I wanted to share some screenshots with you related to, is what's called the Bender-Gestalt test. The Bender-Gestalt test is often used as part of the battery of testing that people undergo with assessment. And the Bender-Gestalt involves these different designs. People are shown these designs on individual cards, and then they are asked to reproduce those designs on a piece of paper. So they're given a piece of paper and a pencil, and they're asked to draw the designs. And the designs are pretty simple, and they don't really require great artistic ability or anything like that. But there are some fairly common mistakes that people might make if there is some sort of brain damage. So this image shows each of those designs as they're presented on the cards. And then the next image shows those designs as drawn by an individual with Alzheimer's disease. And so you can kind of back up and look at or look at the earlier picture. But some of the differences here, one, they don't include all of the dots in this design. This design, they aren't exactly diagonal. With this design, the dots on the card are not connected, but the person who drew this connected these dots. Also, these dots are not connected on the design as it appears on the card, but again, the individual has connected those dots. So you can kind of compare those two. One of the things we talked about a little bit in class yesterday is how, if there are issues, if there is some sort of brain damage, one of the things that commonly occurs is what's called perseveration. And someone who's experiencing perseveration for this design might actually end up continuing to draw dots onto the end of the page or until they run off the paper. And that can be a little bit of a clue that there might be something going on there. Now, we also talked just briefly about neuroimaging as well. Neuroimaging is a way to look at the brain in terms of different brain structures and functioning of the brain. And those are really two different objectives when it comes to neuroimaging. Some of those neuroimaging technologies allow us to see structure and might allow us to identify um, problematic structures, for example, tumors or um, areas where there's damage and that kind of thing. But then other technologies allow us to see which parts of the brain are active when people are performing different types of tasks and that sort of thing. And so you can read a little bit more about some of those techniques that are used to look at structure, things like CAT scans or CT scans and MRIs, as well as those that allow us to look at brain function. So things like PET scans, SPECT, so the single photon emission computed tomography, and fMRIs or functional MRIs. The assessment process may also include psychophysiological assessment, and psychophysiological assessment allows us to look at different physiological processes that might be an indicator of certain behavioral experiences and that sort of thing. And so different types of psychophysiological assessment include things like electroencephalogram or the EEG. The EEG allows us to observe brain activity. And we know that in, for example, different states of sleep, um, different types of brainwave patterns are emitted. And so that's where we may use EEG technology. Another type of psychophysiological exam or psychophysiological assessment is what we often commonly refer to as the lie detector test. What the lie detector test does is it detects changes in heart rate, respiration, and other things of that nature that might be that might change or that might occur when someone becomes emotional as a result of, concerns about lying or being um, eh, just not being truthful, that kind of thing. And so that would be another form of psychophysiological assessment that is often used. And so lots of times when behavioral assessment is done, it involves a combination of many of these techniques that we've talked about.